Hello, this is the final level of Vector Breakthrough. I planned to make an entire video for the second part of the mode, but then I ended up playing the final level so long it became hours long. So we're just going to go over this level because I want to emphasize just how much I enjoyed it. You can see the Rosmontis things on the ground. If you don't remember them from the first video, when you break them your operators get a buff. If enemies pick them up, they get a buff instead. You can notice the other shield guards stole them away. And in a bit you'll see just how tanky they've become because of it. If you kill the enemies who have them, they drop them on the ground again. And if you do hit them, they do a small amount of AoE damage around them. The damage they do is based on hit count, so operators that attack very quickly can just kill you with them. You can notice this stage only has 18 enemies, even less in practice because half of those enemies are just the basic trash mobs from the top lane without any stat increase. But the few enemies that we do have here are extremely dangerous. The stat line is fairly inflated. If you try to kill the Jedi dudes by pushing, you notice they barely take any damage. Rather they take the normal damage, but their health is so high, you're better off just using the buff to kill them. Rosmontis drops more of her devices. And because Arin isn't fast enough, we had to switch to Jaya there. The problem with Arin is that once he blocks the shield guard, he's just going to die. So we split the damage with Jaya and a tentacle, and we get rid of the shield guard that way. The first wave is mostly done and now we're just stalling Rosmontis. We're waiting until she drops one more device. Once you kill her devices, she becomes unable to attack for a bit, and you can use the attack buff to get rid of her. That's what we're trying to do. But then we run into a small problem from the leftover device from the shield guard. After some time of having her devices deployed, Rosmontis will collect them again and do a massive explosion, like that. So with Indigo dead, we can't DPS anymore, and now we just need to wait until she drops another device and go for that one. They're a bit tanky, so with Indigo gone we have to use Arin's help instead. Otherwise we can't kill it in just Jaya, Gravel and the Tentacle. The Tentacle will die almost instantly if we deploy it, so we just wait a moment, so Jaya gets some free damage. And once he gets the buff back you can see him melting the health through. Now the second phase of this fight is kind of scary, despite it basically just being 4 enemies. So we're going to need a moment to set it up properly. Funny story, Arin is only here because of the second phase. He's a completely horrible pick for the first part of the fight. I simply didn't understand what I need to do to beat this boss, because I never bothered to translate the text. We'll go over what happened there later. But know that Arin is a completely pointless pick here because of that, and you see why. You can notice that Click and Arin have the camouflage buff. That's part of the buffs you get from doing the side stages. It only works when you have operators right next to each other. Horizontally or vertically, not diagonally. Here come half the enemies. Okay, so in the second phase, Rosmontis does a much bigger AoE and attack, and every few seconds, probably 30 or so, she drops her pillars on people. Enemies can pick those pillars up and get a massive buff for themselves. If the Jesus dude gets one, he just debuffs all of your operators forever, because he gains a massive SP buff. They get attack speed, now they become tankier. So you really don't want dangerous enemies to touch those. The Amiya that's coming from the top lane mostly just a bit big stat stick with very little defense. So eventually Jaya can deal with that, but we want to buy as much time as possible. To preserve spacing we have to deal with the boss. Also, if we deploy Jaya right now, he will just get debuffed by the Jesus dude and die, which is why we're waiting. Because of the size of the AoE, we can't really delay Rosmontis too much more, or she'll simply kill our operators on the top lane as well. So we have to let her pass here. With the Jesus dude being down though, we can safely deploy Jaya. And the tentacle far away to bait the next viewers. You can notice Jaya just barely gets away with it. If he had 100 less health he would die. So definitely impossible without the model here. Now we're just trying to give Jaya as much time to get rid of this beast. And here's where I made the mistake I mentioned earlier. So once Rosmontis goes below 50% health, she will enter a different phase, where she becomes unblockable, starts doing massive AoE damage, etc, etc, usual boss stuff. There's just one little problem with that. I thought I needed more DPS to kill her second phase because she's very tanky in it, which is why I brought a Rin instead of something like Quartz or Cutter, which would have been more practical for the first part of the run. We trigger the second phase here with Indigo and Gravel, and then we had set up Click and Indigo to shoot the boss on its AFK tile. Once the second phase is triggered and we do a bit of damage, they can swap back. And because the boss walks very slowly, we'll have time to redeploy them again for one more DPS phase. Because the boss was so tanky, I thought I needed to do this to get enough damage. Amiya gets defeated by Jaya, and that just leaves Rosmontis. Every time you deploy something, the boss attacks for a ton of damage. Basically two-shots everything. And only because you have shields on deploy, and no operators due to one of the buffs. She has a very small range, but her AoE is actually massive. So she can hit things with the AoE that she can't actually target otherwise. For example, she would have hit Click there. And now, because she has a very fast attack speed, we'll start throwing bodies at her to slow her down enough to redeploy Indigo. And here is what I hadn't noticed before, which makes a ring completely pointless. Anytime Rosmontis attacks in her final phase, she will actually just damage herself. You can notice her losing health here with every hit. Because I never bothered to translate the text, I didn't know that this is what happened. So I spent all this time trying to make a setup to kill the boss when I could have just spammed Gravel and Tentacles at her. I felt so stupid during this point. It means that it's possible to remove one caster and a Rin in my opinion. Indigo and a Rin can probably be replaced with Cutter, but we'll leave that for when it comes to EN. If I have the time for it, I'll see if I can do it without any buffs as well. That's all from me.